Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So taking a look at BT-05 Battle of Omni, we definitely got a whole bunch of really new and interesting cards, and one of my friend's favorite Digimon got printed in the set, so he tasked me with the job of making a deck around it, so that way he knows what he needs to get for when the card comes out. So his favorite Digimon is Neptunemon, and this whole entire deck is based around trying to utilize Neptunemon to his utmost potential. So going over the deck, starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Upamon. So Upamon is going to be the main Digitama just because he has this nice inheritable of when attacking once per turn. If the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources, then you get to draw 1 card. So just being able to draw a card is really, really powerful, and the opponent not having a Digimon with no Digivolution sources is more common than what people think, especially in BT-05 when everyone's trying to use Digiburst and some other mechanics, on top of which all of the different ways that Blue has to remove Digivolution sources just make this ability really, really easy to get off. And then the last Digitama of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Wanyamon. So Wanyamon is another pretty solid Digimon just because he has a nice inheritable of during your turn. If your opponent has 2 or more Digimon with no Digivolution sources, then this Digimon gets plus 2000 DP. So one of the big things about Neptunemon is the fact that for a Mega, he doesn't exactly have super high DP, so any way that we could DP boost him is definitely going to be really, really good, because that just increases his chance of survival when he's attacking into the opponent's security. The fact that Wanyamon could potentially give us a good DP buff definitely makes him worth running. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Elecmon. So Elecmon is a pretty solid rookie just because he is that value vanilla rookie, where you know the drill. Low play cost, low evo cost, decent DP. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Gabumon. So this Gabumon is still really, really good just because he has the nice on-play ability of allowing us to draw a card. So there's a lot of key and important pieces that we need to see in order to make Neptunemon as powerful as we possibly can. So being able to try to draw as many cards as we possibly can is definitely something we're looking to gain out of the card. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Vmon. So Vmon is just one of the best rookies that we currently can be playing with just because he has jamming. So Neptunemon is a relatively aggressive deck, and the fact that we have a jammer so early on definitely can help Neptunemon close out games just because of what Neptunemon does and how Neptunemon functions. So the idea of just having a early attacker that can stick on the board is definitely something we really, really want. So that way we could again push the level of aggression and make it easier for Neptunemon to close out games. Then the last rookie that we have in the deck is going to be 3 copies of Gaomon. So Gaomon is a pretty solid rookie just because he has this nice inheritable ability where if he was used as part of the Digiburst cost, then instead of going into the trash, he goes into your hand instead. So we are playing with a little bit of Digiburst synergy, so we definitely want to see this card so that way we could try to recycle him when we're using our Digiburst abilities. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Dolphmon. So Dolphmon is a pretty important Digimon for the deck because he has this nice inheritable of during your turn. If the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. So he's one of the few ways in blue that we have at DP boosting our Digimon, and again, because Neptunemon has such low DP, we definitely want any form of DP boosting that we can to make him as strong as he possibly can, so that way he could live up more potential security checks and be more of a problem for the opponent to be facing. So I definitely feel like Dolphmon is a really decent card for the deck and is definitely a very underrated card for Blue to be playing around with. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tobiomon. So Tobiomon is a pretty solid Digimon just because of his value vanilla stat line. So he is in the deck for very similar reasons why we're playing Elecmon, where he has a low play cost, he has a low evo cost, and we don't necessarily care about his DP because we're just using him to try to get up into our higher levels as fast as we possibly can. And the fact that he has such a low play cost is kind of going into why we're running a little bit less on the rookie count, just because he could pseudo make up for those rookie slots just because he costs as efficiently as a rookie. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Coelamon. So Coelamon is a really decent Digimon just because he has the blocker ability. So he's going to be the primary blocker of the deck. And then on top of the blocker ability, he also has a really low Evo cost. So if we need to utilize this card to tempo up into our higher levels, then we don't feel as bad just because we put less investment in Digivolving up into him. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Monzaemon. So Monzaemon is in here for, again, similar reasons why we're running any vanilla cards. This is just a very good tempo tool, just because compared to a lot of other Digimon in his level, he has a really low play cost and a low Evo cost. And again, we don't really care about the DP because we're just utilizing this card to try to get into our higher stages as fast as possible. Next up, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Zudomon. So Zudomon is a really fantastic Digimon for the deck just because he has a nice on-play ability of being able to draw 2 cards. So if we are kind of stuck and we don't see any of our lower levels, we don't necessarily feel super bad about slamming down a Zudomon just because he will allow us to draw some cards. And then on top of which, he also gives a really nice inheritable ability where he gives a nice when attacking ability. If the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources, then we get +1 memory. So the possibility that we're going to be getting a memory from attacking is also really, really nice, on top of the fact that he will also allow us to draw cards if we don't Digivolve up into him. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of MachGaogamon. So MachGaogamon is a really important Digimon for the deck just because this card is doing a whole lot for the deck. So he has the main ability of Digiburst 2, where his Digiburst ability allows us to bounce one of the opponent's level 4 or less Digimon back to their hand, and then discard all of their Digivolution sources. So this is one of the primary ways that we are interacting with the opponent's field, is by utilizing these Digiburst abilities to act as our removal cards. So that way we don't need to waste option slots on running removal cards, and we're just going to be trying to utilize these abilities. So his Digiburst ability to try to help control the board is definitely really, really important. And then what's also really important is the fact that he has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while you have a tamer in play, this Digimon gets a +2000 DP. So as I mentioned before, Blue doesn't have a whole lot of ways of DP boosting their Digimon. So the fact that we have a really decent way to try to DP boost our Neptunemon is definitely something we're really, really interested in. And especially since we are going to be playing Tamers in the deck, it's definitely a really good card for us to think about utilizing. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Zeed Gabumon. So Zeed Gabumon is a really fantastic Digimon for this deck overall, just because he has a nice when Digivolving ability, we get to Digiburst 2. So his Digiburst ability is allowing us to return one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon back to their hand. So similarly to why we're running MachGaogamon is why we're running Zeed Gabumon, where we're trying to utilize this card more for its removal ability, and then on top of the fact that it has a nice removal ability, it also has some relatively decent stats in case we need to be aggressive with the card. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Neptunemon. So Neptunemon is the main man of the deck. He is the star of the show and what everything about the deck is focused around. So Neptunemon is just a really fantastic Digimon overall, just because he has a very low play cost compared to a lot of other Megas in case we actually need to hard play him. And then on top of which, he has a really low Evo cost, so if we need to Evo him, he's really tempo efficient to Evo up into. And then on top of all of that, he has a really powerful ability where during the opponent's turn, this Digimon can't be attacked into. So the only real way to deal with this card is through the opponent having a card that can deal with him by a card effect, just because he can't be attacked into. Now, the only downside about the card is the fact that he does have some relatively low DP compared to a lot of other Megas, but that's kind of okay just because we have a whole bunch of different ways to try to boost his DP, and the fact that he can't be attacked into definitely acts as a form of protection, so that way he could try to stick around as long as possible. So overall, I think Neptunemon is a pretty underrated Digimon, and even though he doesn't seem like he's doing a lot, he definitely could still put in a lot of work, especially depending on the matchup and depending on how you utilize the card. And then for the last Mega of the deck, we're going to be running 3 copies of Omnimon. So this is the new Omnimon that comes out in BT-05, and for this deck, this Omnimon is just a really powerful card and definitely adds a lot of extra aggression to help close out games. So what this Omnimon is doing is, first he has a Evo cost of 4. So him having a lower Evo cost compared to a lot of other level 7s is definitely really good, just because we could tempo up into him a little bit more efficiently than some of the other cards. The only drawback is he has some lower DP, but that's okay just because we're already trying to DP boost our Neptunemon to be as powerful as possible, and all of those buffs will transfer over to Omnimon, so him having slightly lower DP is totally okay, but we're really trying to utilize the card for his abilities. So he has 2 really powerful when Digivolved abilities. His first when Digivolved ability is he has the Advanced ability, where this Digimon can attack even when the opponent has 1 or more memory. So the whole idea is we Digivolve up into Omnimon, and then we could swing with him right away. Even though they are having memory on their side, that's just part of the ability, so that's just how it works. All of the abilities have to resolve before it goes over to the opponent's turn. He also has another when Digivolved ability where we get to unsuspend this Digimon. So unsuspending this Digimon definitely is what allows us to get an extra attack in with this card. So the whole idea is we're going to swing into the opponent's security with Neptunemon, and then we are going to Digivolve Neptunemon up into Omnimon, stand him up, and then we can attack right away and try to leave our opponent with as few memory as possible, just because he does have a slightly more efficient evolution cost. So if we pair that up with like Zeedmon and some other on-attack skills, then the on-attack skills also will start to double up, and that's just, again, more powerful synergy. And then on top of all of that, he has another really powerful effect where during both players' turns, if an opponent's effect would delete this Digimon or return it to the hand or deck, then we could prevent it from leaving by trashing a level 6 card from his Digivolution sources. So he even has his own built-in protection that definitely is going to be trying to keep him around as long as possible. He does have a couple of vulnerabilities, so his DP could still be reduced to 0, and he still could be attacked into, but for the most part, he is a rather hard card for the opponent to be dealing with, or at least he could be. But most of the time, we're really just trying to utilize this card as a good game finisher, because we're going to try to utilize Vmon as that early aggression to try to utilize his jamming to break as much security as early as possible, then Digivolve up into Neptunemon and try to break as much security off of Neptunemon as possible, and then we would Digivolve Neptunemon into Omnimon to try to close out the game just because of his unsuspend and advance ability. So Omnimon is just a really powerful card for the deck overall to be playing around with. Now, you could think about utilizing Omnimon X or the original Omnimon if you really feel like it. I just feel like this is a more aggressive deck rather than a more controlled deck, so I want the most aggressive card that I could possibly utilize. And out of the 3 Omnimons that the deck can use, this is just the most aggressive Omnimon out of the 3. Next, onto the options, I'm going to be running only 4 copies of Hammerspark. So Hammerspark is just a really powerful option for the deck to be playing around with, just because the situations that this card can be really good are just so numerous. And this card is just doing so much for the deck, it's actually kind of insane. So being able to gain 1 memory out of nowhere is just really powerful for this deck, because it can help set up a whole bunch of our really powerful and aggressive plays. So the best use of this card is, let's just say you're sitting on a level 5, the opponent leaves you at 1 memory, then you could utilize Hammerspark to go to 2 memory, Digivolve into Neptunemon, swing with Neptunemon, then Digivolve into Omnimon, stand him up because of Omnimon's when Digivolved ability, and then swing because of Omnimon's advanced ability. So that's just a really powerful line of play that we want to utilize Hammerspark with, and is one powerful line of play that we could utilize Hammerspark with. But the fact that we could just gain 1 memory just can still be a very powerful tool, just because it makes a lot of our plays more efficient or more powerful. And then on top of which, it has a really powerful security ability of being able to gain 2 memory. So all of that together just makes Hammerspark one of the best option cards for the deck to be utilizing. Next, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Sora and Joe. So Sora and Joe is just a really insane tamer card for this deck to be playing around with, and is basically the primary way the deck is going to be removing evolution sources to turn a whole bunch of our synergies online. So it's a 4-cost tamer card, and it has the really powerful ability where at the start of your turn, if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution cards, then we gain 2 memory. So this is really, really powerful because even though it's not basically setting our memory to 3, it's still giving us enough memory to make a lot of our plays possible and make a lot of powerful plays. And then on top of that, if you have multiple Sora and Joes out at the same time, this ability does stack, so you could potentially gain a whole bunch of memory if you have multiple Sora and Joes out. And then on top of that, it also has another really powerful ability where during your turn, when one of your blue Digimon attacks, then you could suspend this tamer and trash the bottom 2 evolution sources of one of the opponent's Digimon. So this is, again, the primary way we're going to be removing evolution sources, just because we're going to be constantly wanting to swing with either Neptunemon or Vmon. And just being able to remove evolution sources is really, really powerful for the deck. Again, just because it turns a whole bunch of our synergies online. And the fact that it trashes 2 of them makes it even faster to get rid of their evolution sources. So this card is overall just absolutely insane for the deck to be playing around with, just because we are playing more into that aggressive style of deck, and this just rewards us for doing so. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 1 copy of the starter deck Red Tai Kamiya. So this is just more of a tech tool just because it has a really low play cost, so it's really efficient to just jam on the field. And then on top of which it has a really powerful ability where during your turn, all of your Digimon get plus 1000 DP. So again, we're trying to fix the fact that Neptunemon doesn't have the greatest DP in the game for a level 6, and Tai Kamiya definitely is a really powerful card just because he will passively boost him by 1000, on top of which he'll also passively boost all of our other Digimon. So this is just overall, again, a really decent tamer for us to be playing around with. And then there's just so many tools and tech cards that you could think about utilizing that it's actually kind of insane just because of all of the different applications you could make Neptunemon be utilized with. So a couple of the key highlighted cards is you could think about using Syakomon just because it is trying to act similarly to the Chumon, Gazimon, and Terriermon, just trying to limit the opponent's options. You could play a little bit more into attacking the evolution sources for some additional benefits. So Ikakumon and Vikemon are definitely some really good cards you could think about utilizing for that type of strategy. You could even think about utilizing Plesiomon for more of a Turbo Omnimon strategy, just because Neptunemon does have an Evo cost of 2, so it doesn't matter if you Digivolve off of Plesio or off of Neptune, you're still going to be going into Omnimon very, very quickly and efficiently, and like I said before, you could think about utilizing the original Omnimon and Omnimon X Antibody, just because there are some very powerful Omnimons that you could be utilizing. And then with more of that Garurumon Omnimon style of deck that you would want to be incorporating, Supreme Cannon is definitely a really powerful option card that you could utilize for that type of synergy. And then I also think that Absolute Blast is definitely a really powerful blue option card to be playing around with. Now, you could also think about utilizing Cocytus Breath, but I just like Absolute Blast a little bit better, just because of all of the different applications and utilities the card has. And then there's a couple of support packages that you could think about utilizing. So you could utilize some of the hybrid Digimon, just because if you're still going to be playing MachGaogamon, then you're going to want to try to have blue tamers. And what better way to utilize blue tamers than some of the hybrid Digimon? So you have their typical searcher, you have just your good hybrid Digimon, and then you have a card that's actually acting really, really similar to Neptunemon in the form of Beowulfmon. So whether you're trying to aggress with Beowulfmon or Neptunemon, it's still making it very hard for the opponent to get rid of your Digimon, just because you're reducing the amount of ways they can interact with your Digimon. And then there's a couple of really solid blue tamer cards that you could think about utilizing. I think Davis is definitely one of blue's best tamer cards, just because his on-play ability, being able to try to fix your hand, is definitely really, really good. On top of which, he is also a memory-fixing tamer, so pair that up with Sora and Joe, and he's going to set your memory to 3. Then Sora and Joe can trigger, setting your memory to 5, and then any more Sora and Joes will just continually increasing the amount of memory you're going to have to play with during your turn, and that's just, again, really, really powerful to be thinking about. Then if you're still thinking about keeping MachGaogamon and utilizing tamers, you could also think about utilizing the Vidramon package, where the secret rare Vidramon, his inheritable ability is really good just because he is one of the only other blue DP buffs that they have access to, except at this time his ability is on both players' turns. So that's just also another really interesting card you could think about. And then a lot of the other Digimon cards are just really aggressive cards. So if you're trying to play even more aggressive, then the other Digimon cards are really good just because they still have tamer support and they still are doing some very aggressive things. So this one has jamming, and this one gives himself a DP boost, and his inheritable ability also will let you draw some cards, and drawing cards is always good. And then to wrap up the Digimon package, you could also think about utilizing Taichi V-Tamer as a very efficient tamer to play, and then on top of which, with all of the Digimon stuff, you could either draw more cards or boost one of your Digimon's DP by 1,000, so you could definitely pair this up with Neptunemon if you have a Digimon sitting on the field to just boost him by another 1,000, and that's just, again, really powerful to think about. And then if you are going to be playing a little light on the red cards, then you could think about utilizing some of red's more powerful option cards. So red has a Trident Revolver that you could think about utilizing. So Trident Revolver is really, really good just because he allows you to delete one of your opponent's weaker Digimon, and then on top of which you also get to play a tamer that costs 4 or less for free. So if you're just sitting on a red Tai Kamiya, then you could freely utilize Trident Revolver, or if Trident Revolver gets checked in the security, you could freely utilize that to play some of your more expensive tamer cards, which you still would want to be playing if you're playing MachGaogamon, because that's like the whole point of playing MachGaogamon for his DP boost for Neptunemon. So Trident Revolver is definitely a really good option card you could think about. On top of which, you could still think about utilizing cards like Gaia Force to act as bigger removal cards if you are going that route. So there's just so many different things you could do with Neptunemon just because there's so many different ways that you could support the card that it's really interesting to think about all of these different applications and how all of these different packages and tech tools change the deck. But I definitely think what I laid out here is a really powerful and really interesting deck. I don't think it's like tier 1 hyper competitive, but I definitely think depending on the matchup, this could definitely still put in quite a bit of work, and it's still a relatively decent deck and a decently fun deck to be playing around with. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.